For the next video in the series of base medicines and self-sufficiency and all of those fun things, I will be teaching on tinctures. Tinctures are an easy, accessible, and powerful medicinal preparation. They are one of my favorite medicinal preparations and one I turn to very often for crafting medicine in my household. They are not only convenient to carry around, to keep with you fairly constantly, but they're also very easy to take. There's not a lot of preparation or any preparation at all once they're made, unlike a tea that you have to steep. They can be a really good means of taking medicine that doesn't taste as good as it would if it were through a tea, something that may taste a little too bitter or just unpleasant. They're also a very stable form of medicine. Tinctures are often made with alcohol, and the alcohol-based ones can last for decades or even longer. Alcohol works wonders for extracting resins, something that water is a little lacking with, so resins aren't something we can get very easily through infusions or decoctions. And similar with essential oils, water is okay at it, but it's not great, and alcohol is just really good at extracting these things. However, alcohol does not easily extract minerals, which water does, and so does vinegar, which is another option for tincturing. All in all, though, with the knowledge of crafting infusions and decoctions alongside tinctures, you have access to pretty much all medicines that you would need to take internally or wish to. Both of these methods kind of pick up where the other one lacks, and it is a perfect duo of understanding to craft a wide variety of medicine. Now, before I get too deep into this, I do want to push my Patreon. It's what keeps things running over here and is allowing me to teach these lessons right now. I have a workshop coming up at the end of the week. If you're interested in it, it will be on hearthcraft, all that is, delving into some of my favorite practices, where to get started, all of that good stuff. It's available in a $15 tier, the Juniper tier, and all of this will be linked down below. There are a lot of things over there. I share herbal profiles, book recommendations, art, and a ton of other fun benefits. There's even a Facebook page for higher tiers if you're interested in joining that community. I have a ton of fun over there and I'm able to share even more information. So if that's something you're interested in, or you just want to help support this channel, I'd really appreciate it if you went and checked it out. All right, with that out of the way, let's jump into tinctures and how to craft them. There are two main methods of crafting tinctures. The traditional method that is based in folklore, and the weight and volume method that is a little bit more exact. For both, you will need a solvent, either alcohol, glycerin, or vinegar, and an herb of your choosing, either fresh or dried. So first, let's talk about alcohol. The solvent I personally prefer for tincturing. Alcohol has the longest shelf life out of any of these solvents, and it also works to extract the widest array of constituents. I personally prefer to use neutral tasting alcohol, something kind of like vodka, and it is essential that you use something that is at least 100 proof or 50% alcohol. Personally, I prefer to have on hand 190 proof or 95% alcohol. It is the easiest for me to get my hands on. It lasts the longest, and I can easily water it down to get it to the proof that I need for each herb that I'm working with. It's quite common for herbalists to use specific percentages of alcohol for certain herbs, depending on their molecular compounds and all of that business. And so having an alcohol that you can either water down or use at such a high proof really helps to work with the widest array of herbs. This isn't necessary, but it does tend to help a lot with making sure you're getting the most potent medicine or perfect extraction. As with each of these videos, it is of course beyond the scope of the video to talk about each individual herb and how that will fit in. But many reputable books do talk about this. There are plenty of online resources, and a quick Google search will tell you what percentage alcohol is best for tincturing certain herbs. At a minimum, though, I would recommend using no lower than 100 proof or 50% alcohol, especially if you're using fresh herbs, as they will add a little bit more moisture and water to this mixture. And it's important that the tincture remains at a certain level of alcohol so that it retains its shelf life and doesn't go bad. Now, of course, not everyone is going to want to use alcohol-based tinctures. People with a history of liver disease, alcoholism, or some personal religious beliefs, it's not always desirable to work with alcohol and ingest that. Additionally, ingesting alcohol should be avoided by babies and small children. So in these instances, we turn to vinegar and glycerin. I do not personally have any experience with working with glycerin, so it's not something I will delve into extensively within this video, but I do feel it's important to note. I know many people have a lot of luck and really enjoy using it for making tinctures for children, along with those that would just wish to avoid alcohol. It is worth looking into if you're someone who wishes to avoid alcohol, but it's just not something I've really explored personally. Vinegars, on the other hand, I do know very well. Unlike alcohol, vinegar is great at extracting minerals. It is also quite delicious, especially when paired with spicy herbs. However, it tends to be best practice to use dried herbs when making vinegars unless you can ingest them quickly. Fresh herbs can easily lead to molding and fermentation, and they will greatly decrease the shelf life of the vinegar, which is already much shorter than that of an alcohol. For most vinegar-based tinctures, people tend to use apple cider, but I have used balsamic and all sorts. You can work with whatever you have on hand and whatever you desire. And honestly, I think it's best to work with the flavors that you enjoy and what you think will go best with the herbs you are using, especially because you do need to take larger doses of vinegars as compared to alcohol-based tinctures to get the full effect. It's just not quite as potent. Ultimately, both glycerins and vinegars are worse solvents than alcohol or water ever will be. And so they are not preferred for tincturing, but they do serve as a great option for people that need to avoid alcohol. So, like I said earlier, there are two methods of crafting tinctures, the traditional method and the weight to volume method. Both will create very potent medicine. The traditional method is a little bit simpler and requires a few less materials to craft, whereas the weight and volume method does require a bit of math, but if you're able to multiply, you'll be fine. And ultimately, that is my preferred method because it is a little bit more exact and easier to replicate. It is also the essential method to follow if you were working with herbs that you have to be careful with their dosing. But I will share both. I think it's valuable to know both, and sometimes I'm feeling a little lazy and I'm gonna go with the traditional method. Or you may just not have all of the supplies needed to craft the weight to volume method, and that's perfectly okay. You can make a traditional one, you will still get great medicine from it. So first and foremost, let's jump through the traditional method. For this, you'll need an herb. Only work with one herb at a time when you're tincturing. I will explain at the end how to combine tinctures to make multi-herb tinctures, but it's easier to just work with one herb at a time in your tinctures. This way they won't get complicated and the solvent will have a much easier time extracting all the right things that it needs to. I also prefer to use fresh herbs when possible because they have all of their goodness going on with them. You will also need a clean mason jar and a solvent of your choice. So alcohol, vinegar, or glycerin. If you're working with fresh herbs, make sure to rinse them off and make sure they're all clean. Then chop them up as finely as possible. You may even wish to use a food processor if you have one. I don't, so I just spend a lot of time chopping them, and that works pretty well. Then add them to your jar and cover it with your solvent. For fresh flowers, seeds, leaves, and bark, make sure to cover the herbs completely and leave, if possible, about 1 inch of solvent above the material. For fresh roots, you'll want to leave a couple of inches of solvent above the material. Now, when it comes to working with dried flowers, leaves, seeds, bark, those guys, you'll want to leave maybe 3 inches of alcohol above the material. And when it comes to dried roots, fill the container about halfway with the root and then the rest of the way with alcohol. These are not roots. Then make sure to cover with a lid and label them with what they are. So this one is an usnea tincture, and here we have an elderberry tincture going. This one I just started yesterday, and this one's been going for about a week now. Make sure you store your tinctures in a dark cabinet and leave them there for 4 to 6 weeks, making sure to shake them every single day or whenever you remember. It's okay if you miss it here and there. Now, the straining of them and finalizing them is the same with both preparations, either traditional or weight to volume. So I am going to jump now to how to craft the weight to volume before we get through finalizing the tincture. For this, of course, you will need the herb of your choosing, a mason jar, the solvent that you're working with, and you will also need a kitchen scale. So as we know, this is a little bit more exact. It is my preferred method, and if you can multiply, you can do this. The only thing that may stand in your way is if you don't have a kitchen scale. That is necessary for crafting this one, but that's all okay. Similar to the last preparation, if you're using fresh herbs, make sure to wash and dry them completely before getting started. Next, you can either chop your herbs up or go straight to weighing them. It doesn't really matter what step you do first here, whatever feels natural and right to you. The weight of the herbs is going to dictate how much solvent we use. So for fresh herbs, we use a 1:2 ratio, which basically means for every ounce of fresh herb used, add 2 fluid ounces of your solvent, or 1 part herb, 2 parts solvent. For dry herbs, we use a 1:4 ratio. So 1 part herb, 4 parts solvent. Every 1 ounce of herb, use 4 fluid ounces of your solvent. That's what I did with both of these tinctures. Now with this method, occasionally things won't always go to plan. Something like usnea is a very fluffy herb and they can be kind of hard to cover. That's okay. When that happens, you can add a little bit more alcohol until it's covered and just keep track of how much you're adding. You can keep a ratio up and you'll still have awareness of its potency. And you can also kind of push it down with a wooden tool if need be. Then once you've got it all set up, make sure to cover with a cap, label, put them in a cabinet again, leave it for 4 to 6 weeks, shaking whenever you remember, every day preferably. If you can't wait 4 to 6 weeks for your medicine, after a few days it will be pretty potent, and it will be potent enough to be used as medicine, though be sure to take only what you need and leave the rest to continue to infuse through this time. Once the 4 to 6 weeks has passed with either preparation, it is time to strain it and finalize the tincture. I personally like to use a cotton tea towel placed in a metal mesh strainer. Simply pour your herbs into this strainer situation and allow it to pour into your final bottle. I recommend using amber bottles if you can, but ultimately you just need something that will keep the light out, so you can get kind of creative with that. Make sure when you're straining the herbs to really squeeze out as much of the liquid that you can. You want to get all of that potent medicine, and pressing the last of the solvent out will do a lot for that. Like I said, I prefer amber bottles, and it's really good to use a polyseal cap. Make sure to label with the herb that this is, the date that it was crafted, and any other information that you may find valuable. I like to put the ratio on this as well, and the percent alcohol used. And then there you have it, a tincture. Make sure you store it in a place away from fire. This is highly flammable, and keep it out of the reach of children. Like I said, if you want to combine your tinctures at the end, you can, doing it in the ratios that you wish to from these final tinctures. It's much easier this way, and you will have far more control over the potency of the medicine that you are crafting. But just mix them together however much you need to, and enjoy. This is a very simple, wonderful means of crafting medicine. It's so potent and useful, and it really picks up where infusions and decoctions, can't. And so having this under your belt will help you to go far as an herbalist and working with herbalism in your home. I also personally just really enjoy making tinctures. They're very fun to watch how they change. Both of these had clear alcohol placed into them. This one yesterday, and it's already turned such a rich, beautiful color. Tinctures make the base of a lot of my favorite additional preparations as well, namely syrups and honeys. When I'm making medicines of that nature, one part of it is often a tincture, and having this knowledge really opens the door to a lot of other preparations. So I hope you found this useful and enjoyed, and I hope you go out and start making some tinctures. I believe the next video I will be teaching on with this fashion will either be on syrups or on oils. So let me know which one you're most interested in. And that's about it for this video. Like I mentioned in the beginning, if you want to check out my Patreon, that would be greatly appreciated. It is what keeps things going over here. And beyond that, if you haven't checked out my other channel yet, I'd recommend going and checking that out. There I share blogs, lots more herbal medicine, and more just daily rhythms. So if that's something you're interested in, that's linked down below along with my Patreon. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I hope to see you soon.